Good. Well, welcome everybody, and I'm delighted to welcome you all back in person to this wonderful Stationers' Hall for PLS's 2022 Annual Rights and Licensing Forum on World IP Day, no less. The hall itself has undergone substantial upgrades since we last met here. I think you might all feel the air conditioning as a starting point, and that was in 2019, and the main rooms do, though, look beautiful as before. As some of you will know, the Stationers' Company is the City of London livery company for the communications and content industries. The company itself was formed in 1403, receiving its royal charter in 1557, and this hall is the third oldest hall in the city, and it's the birthplace of copyright. Built in the 17th century, the hall's upgrade ensures it's more accessible to everyone and more sustainable, and its 350th anniversary will be celebrated next year. Hopefully we'll be here too. We have only met in person once since our last meeting in this hall, and that was in September last year, when we also celebrated the 40th anniversary of PLS. You'll find on your chair a copy of the short history of PLS, which we produced for that occasion, and incidentally, a copy of this year's annual review is inside the back cover. It's been a very good 40th year for PLS, as you will be hearing from the team shortly. We're really pleased, finally, to be back to our business as usual. I'd also like to pay particular thanks to Sarah and all the PLS team putting together today, but for their work throughout the last 12 months and going forward. I'm especially pleased that this year we are co-hosting our drinks reception with Bouquet International. You'll be hearing more about this excellent charity from their president, Nigel Newton, during the reception after this forum. And finally, there are no fire drills expected, so please do bear in mind the fire exits, which are to your left here, my right, and follow any instructions from the team. I'm now going to pass over to the team. Chief Executive Sarah Faulder will start with a brief overview of the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Let me also join in welcoming all of you back here in person. It's our first really full forum since 2019. We did, of course, meet briefly, had a shorter meeting last year. And since then, you won't be surprised to learn that we've been somewhat preoccupied with trialing new ways of working. We've wanted basically to capitalize on the newfound benefits for many staff of working from home, whilst also maintaining the collaborative and social aspects of working together in the office. We've settled on 2 days a week in the office, making sure that in those 2 days, the teams that work together, they all come in at the same time. But for the most part, staff are working from home for 3 days a week, and that seems to be working well for everyone so far. But we have been working on your behalves very hard during the year, and if this were to move, it would be helpful. No, it doesn't want to move. It doesn't want to move at all. Is there another way of moving this forward? Yeah. Okay, we did distribute over £38 million to publishers last year, going straight to your bottom lines. A very significant sum, and we have our colleagues at CLA and NLA, who are here represented today, to thank for all their licensing efforts. That's great, thank you. So Business has been going on as usual, as you can see. That was a very good year for us. During the year, we've had a couple of consultations on license proposals from CLA, and we've consulted with you, and those proposals have been approved in principle by publishers. The first is a new training license, which will ensure that the providers of training courses, who are not educational institutions themselves and therefore don't fall under the education license, that they will be properly licensed in future. There are more and more training providers, as we know. The second license on which we consulted is called the Read-Aloud license, and CLA will be introducing that into schools in September. It will be an opt-in license. It won't suit everyone, but we know that it is something that many publishers do want to opt into so that they don't have to handle these permissions on an individual basis. The demand for the Read-Aloud license came from teachers who needed to find an alternative way to read to their classes during lockdown, and that demand has persisted ever since. In addition to consulting on license proposals, we've been supporting our trade associations in their responses to government consultations. You're going to hear more about this later with our policy panel, but exhaustion of rights is one of the issues, and artificial intelligence and text and data mining is another big issue, and I'm not going to steal their thunder on that because this needs to be, you need to hear it in full from all our panelists. But we are working closely with the British Copyright Council and all our trade association members on responses to these particular potential threats to publishers' rights. So at this point, it's probably appropriate to mention that we appointed during the year our first dedicated policy and communications manager, Will Crook, and he will be moderating the policy panel later, so you'll get to hear from him and to talk to him afterwards. He's already helping to raise the profile of publishing and your concerns and interests in Westminster, which is where he comes from and is very well plugged in there. So he's very useful for all of us, and particularly insofar as issues that PLS is involved in, which involve collective issues, particularly collective licensing. So, do I need to point it in a particular place? Ah, good. You may be wondering what's been happening around the review of collective licensing revenues splits between publishers, authors, and visual artists for revenue from magazines and journals, and we heralded this last year. There's actually been more work to do behind the scenes than we originally bargained for to ensure that everyone is ready for this very significant exercise, which we last undertook in 2015. We are now finally edging forward, and so you can expect to hear much more from us in the coming year. We will need your support if and when any of your titles fall within the samples that need to be assessed. And we will count on the full cooperation of the publishers that we approach if we're to achieve the best possible outcome for publishers. So please do start thinking about being ready to be able to lay your hands on your contracts with your authors and visual artists. Moving on, this is all about compliance. We are obliged under the 2016 CRM regulations to file on our website an annual transparency report. This is now ready and it's going up onto our website. It tells you all about how we're constituted, a lot of information that you'll be familiar with, and it has a lot of information about our distributions broken down in more detail. So please do take a look at that, and if you have any questions, do direct them towards well, I'd suggest Tom West in the first place, or me. We're actually in the throes of updating our website, so you can expect to see a newly refreshed website in the autumn. We continue to look out for your interests across the globe by keeping abreast of copyright developments around the world, of which there are many at the moment. We are active in IFRO, the international body for collective management organizations like PLS, and I've in fact been serving on the IFRO board on behalf of publishers for the last nearly 3 years. For example, one of the things we've been involved in recently is trying to support our Canadian counterpart, Access Copyright, in their long and difficult fight for copyright in the face of their copyleft legislation. And we do feel we've got an opportunity as the UK negotiates its trade agreement with Canada to try and explain the benefits of the sort of collective licensing that you are all benefiting from at the moment. We're particularly proud of a recent initiative, which is to coordinate and enable the realization in the UK of Ukraine's First Lady Zelenska's initiative to provide Ukrainian books to refugee children in this country. These children find themselves, through no fault of their own, in a new country with a new language, having left behind their homes in war-torn Ukraine and often, sadly, their families. The Books Without Borders initiative is also being rolled out across Europe through the Federation of European Publishers. The first books printed for us here in the UK by Halston are being delivered, as we sit here, to Ukrainian refugee children scattered throughout our 4 nations. So we're very proud to have supported that. It just remains for me to thank my very hard-working team. I'm not going to name them individually, but they're all listed on the back of your annual review. For another tremendous year working on your behalf. So without further ado, I think that's a perfect cue for our Chief Operating Officer, Tom West, who is at the heart of everything that PLS does. And he's going to give you an update on collective licensing. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to begin my update and review with a positive headline, as has been hinted on by Sarah, which is that 2021 was another record year for collective licensing in terms of the revenue received by PLS and paid out to publishers. And I think that collective licensing remaining in very good shape is testament to all involved in collective licensing, but particularly, as alluded to by Sarah, the fine work of our licensing partners, CLA and NLA Media Access. I'd like to extend, again, a huge thank you for them and all of the work that they've been doing over the past 12 to 18 months. In terms of payments out to publishers, we have distributed, as you've heard, just over £38 million to publishers over the course of the year. That's literally money out of the door. 15,000 individual payments. 98% of that was paid out to publishers within 3 weeks of receipt, which is something that we take extremely seriously, getting the money out to you as quickly as possible. Now, in a minute, we'll talk about the individual sectors, noting that no one single factor is behind the positive figures for collective licensing. It is a question of doing the hard yards to ensure that licensing remains of value, that it continues to adapt to evolving user habits and their needs, that the operational wheels keep turning. We are a very operational-focused business. And ultimately, I think most importantly, that you all continue to produce the content that people want to acquire, to access and to reuse. And that reuse is made possible through the model that you see here. And I think many of perhaps most of you will be familiar with the model to varying degrees. But I'd just like to pause for a second and consider, if not the elegance, perhaps that will be stretching it slightly, but certainly the wonderful practicality of this model that has been in place for over 40 years, particularly in how it brings rights holders together, all of the diverse interests that you can see in the left-hand side, publishers, authors, and visual artists, to deliver a collective licensing solution that works for users and for rights holders alike. Now, this is something that we've been working to communicate perhaps a bit more effectively than we had done previously, and this is something that I'll come back to in a few minutes' time. But please do keep this mechanism, the mechanism that makes all this possible, in mind as we go through the different sectors. Let's hope the clicker works. Are you seeing anything on the screen? There we go. So having a look at the main sectors, and I'll preface this to say that it will be a high-level run-through. There is a lot to cover. I hope you stay with me. If there are more detailed questions at the end, please do address them to me. I'm also pleased to say that we've got some representatives from CLA and from NLA here today, particularly James Bennett and Matt Aspinall, who head up the rights and licensing teams at their respective organisations. I know they're always keen to speak to publishers and get an idea of your concerns and your priorities, so do seek them out. So starting with education, which once again made up well over a third of the total revenues that we distribute. We ended the year almost 6% up in education licensing, with the main increase being in higher education. Schools was up 6% at, or 2% rather, at £6 million. The current CLA license agreement with Department for Education, which makes up a sizable chunk of that 6 million, is due to run to April 2026. So a bit of time to go before that one comes up for renewal. There are also centralised agreements with Scotland, Northern Ireland, and most recently Wales, which obviously brings some welcome stability to what is such an important sector. It also means for the first time ever, all state schools in the UK will be covered by centralised agreements. Now, there's a lot of work been going on in the background to support and strengthen these agreements, and it's worth spending perhaps a couple of minutes on some of those. The education platform, first of all, the EP, which CLA has been working on tirelessly over the last, 12 to 18 months, has really seen growth over the last 12 months. 62 partner publishers are now signed up, 41,000 books, titles are on the EP, books and journals and magazines. And in terms of schools taking up and using the platform, 6,400 schools are now signed up. That's around 20% of all schools in the UK. 34,000 individual users have used the platform, mainly teaching staff and support staff. And then in terms of publisher participation, we are massively grateful to those publishers that have embraced the concept from day one and have produced content which has made the whole endeavour a success. We would encourage any publishers that haven't yet signed up, particularly if your content is used in the schools sector, to get in touch with us either directly through PLS or through Lucy Hadfield, their product manager, who's leading on this particular project, and we'll be seeking out publishers to sign up and provide content. And then for those already participating in the platform, obviously the more content that you're able to provide, the better the service that CLA can provide to to the schools involved, and also the more you stand to benefit from revenues that are generated. We have paid out 2 tranches, main tranches of revenue for EP use over the last couple of years, one in June last year and then another one in June just gone. So there is a real incentive, I think, for publishers to get on board. There is also data that we make available in PLS Account Manager in your PLS account, which gives you a real insight into which schools are using your content, which I think would be of great value to many publishers. There's also a lot of innovation going on with regards to data collection in the school sector. It's something that I think has been on the list for some time, to just really understand how usage has changed in the school sector, particularly over the last couple of years, but not just then. So a massive piece of behavioural research, which we hope will inform CLA developing licensing or improving the licensing that they're delivering to the school sector. And also, I think, helping us to deliver revenue to publishers that is most closely aligned to license use as possible. There are a few particular items worthy of note. CLA has been working with the print management software company Papercut to integrate a data collection widget into copying equipment, which I think, obviously, the greater the adoption we can get of that, the more automated the data can become. Google Classroom app, which they've developed, which fingerprints digitized content and matches it to rights holders' content in the EP. ELA, sitting there, will probably be a better place to describe the technical details of that. But I think it's a really interesting piece of technology, and you can see the potential applications in other sectors as well. More broadly, perhaps prosaically, but equally important, is a platform they've developed to digitize or to upgrade the way that they collect data in the sector, developing a platform called My Content to collect data on copying usage, which previously was done by boxes sitting by photocopiers, where people would be required to put slips into the box to identify what they've actually been copied. So it's all about revolutionizing the way that data is being collected, and I think crucially reducing admin for teachers, which is obviously probably a big concern of all of us. And then on a broader note, the big piece of behavioural research, which, as I say, we hope will help to inform the distribution of revenues and make it more aligned, fairer distribution of revenues. Sarah mentioned in terms of new license development that there will be a Read-Aloud license which is going to be rolled out in the coming weeks. You're going to be hearing from Fran Wallace, our publisher relations executive, who will be in touch about that. I won't go over it again. I think Sarah's probably covered the main points in that. But do keep an eye out for communications, which will be going out shortly. So, moving on to how are we doing on the click-throughs? So, moving on to further education now. This is a sector that revenues has gone up 5% over the last year, up to 1.4 million. The increase is more down to the timing of payments than an increase in the overall value of the sector, but it does indicate a degree of stability in the sector, which is something that we haven't always been able to talk about. There has also been a lot of work behind the scenes in order to bring more value for money to the FE sector, and this includes the rollout of the education platform. I think we've got 160 and counting FE colleges that are signed up to the platform now, and that is going to be an ongoing priority over the next few weeks and months. So keep an eye out for that. And obviously, if your content is used in the FE sector, obviously the more content that you're able to provide, the better for the service. And then higher education, which, as I said at the beginning, is the main driver behind the increase in education revenues. Higher education revenues was up 12% at 6.6 million this year. Two reasons for this, I think. One was the earlier than expected completion of invoicing and payment. Secondly, an increase in student numbers, which may sound counterintuitive with everything that's been going on over the last couple of years. The way that the student numbers is calculated is based on a 2-year lag, so it will be student numbers from 2 years ago. Having said that, the indications are from government stats that student numbers have held up over the last couple of years. So again, it bodes well for payments, hopefully for the next payment that we're going to be making from higher education sector. The current licence agreement with Universities UK is due to run to July 2024, so CLA will be gradually building up to those renegotiations. Obviously, we're going to be in touch with you if there are any elements to consult on. There often are. We will be in touch with you as and when to gauge your thoughts on any concessions or any enhancements that may need to be made to the higher education offering. The digital content store, which I think most of you will know about by now, remains squarely at the centre of CLA's offering to the HE sector, used by over 145 UK universities and now a number in the Republic of Ireland. 80% of usage in the HE sector is scanned content from print books uploaded to the DCS. So you can see DCS is incredibly well aligned with how the license is being used in HE. And there will be and has been an ongoing development of the DCS, certainly over the last 12 months. James Bennett has been heavily involved in working with publishers to source born digital content to put onto the EP, effectively an equivalent of the print material that is being scanned and uploaded onto the DCS. And it's all about bringing higher resolution images onto the DCS and obviously adding value to that service. 60,000 pieces of born digital content hopefully brought in by summer, autumn, I think probably summer this year, in order to get it in for the new academic year. And remember, as always, you can get access to really useful data in your PLS accounts about how your content is being used in the higher education sector. So, on to language schools, which doesn't generate a huge amount of money, but it has been hardest hit by the pandemic and by Brexit, seeing an absolute collapse in student numbers, which, as you can see, has led to an 80% reduction in revenues this year. While we remain hopeful that the revenues will begin to increase in 23-24, it's likely that the levels will remain as they are for this year. So obviously very hard hit, and probably one of the most negative updates that we've had to deliver this time around. So Sarah mentioned, and again, I won't cover this in much detail, a new blanket license which we're going to be rolling out over the coming months. This is something that CLA has developed to fill a gap between educational corporate licensing, where organisations are delivering training to external candidates. It will be an opt-out license, so there is no action that you need to take, but we will be sending out a bulletin, I believe, tomorrow, to brief you on that license. And obviously, if you have any questions, get in touch with us, particularly Fran on the publisher relations side. So that's education. We will now move to business and public sector, which I think most of you will know is licensed by CLA and by NLA. Now, CLA licensing covers books, journals, and magazines. Magazine publishers have the option of licensing either through CLA or through NLA. I'm going to start off with CLA licensing before we move on to NLA licensing and some of the services, interesting services that they've been developing over the last couple of years. So, CLA licensing was up on the previous year at a healthy £13 million. Shared between just over 2,000 magazine, journal and book publishers. I think the increase is due to various factors. Business licensing is very operational driven, so a lot of this is about working on back office systems to make sure that their renewal process, the sales process, is as efficient as it possibly can be. And there's been a huge investment by CLA over the past couple of years to put a lot of effort into improving those processes, and clearly it's reaped rewards with the figures you see here. So a really good year for CLA for business licensing. On public sector, central government was up 8% at 360,000. Local authorities was up 17% at 1.4 million for similar reasons to the increase in business revenue. NHS was again steady at 1.1 million. There are a couple of license renegotiations coming up in 2023. Central government, which obviously doesn't generate a huge amount of money, but strategically it has a lot of value. Local authorities, I think, is maybe next year in terms of developing the local authorities license. NHS are a couple of the big ones. So NHS England and Wales run to 2023, and it's worth keeping an eye out for any updates that we have for you with regards to NHS licensing. So on to NLA licensing, and around 230 magazine publishers choose to license through NLA. We again distributed a healthy £3 million to those 230 publishers, and as well as with CLA, just a huge amount of hard work on the part of their sales team to keep things moving, keep the revenue ticking over. There were a couple of notable factors which is worth mentioning. The Simplified license, which was introduced a couple of years ago, has really gained traction. This was about reducing the complexity of for licensees and taking out an NLA license, simplifying the tariff for those licensees. It's been extremely positive. The engagement between NLA and the sales and their clients has been, I think, a real success story again, and it really bodes well for the future in terms of the revenues that we can expect to receive and distribute onto publishers over the next few years. And then their indefinite access extension was again launched in 2021 and is again proving extremely popular. This gives licensees the ability to access content on their media monitoring platforms for as long as they hold an NLA license. And I think it reflects perhaps a change in the, and Matt will have a view on this afterwards if you're interested in this area, perhaps a change in the way that people are consuming media monitoring content. There's a lot more interest in analysing trends across a period of time, and so this is ideally placed to give them the opportunity to do that. There are some additional services which are effectively set up to complement and enhance CLA's core license offering, and it's worth running through a few of these. So the Eclipse database service, which is very much an NLA staple, it's been going for a number of years. I think I mentioned it last time out. For participating publishers, it sources content, online and print content, directly from their production systems, delivers it to media monitoring companies in high resolution format, and very swiftly, so they get that content as quickly as they possibly can. There are also an advantage in terms of more content moving behind paywalls, and this is obviously something that is becoming increasingly important as a lot of publishers, particularly magazine publishers, move to a digital-first strategy, particularly B2B publishers. And it's obviously important for collective licensing that media monitoring organizations can get access to that content behind the paywall. So a really interesting and important, I think, piece of development there. The Agent for Publishers service, which again I think has probably been going for a couple of years. I'm looking at Matt here. This sees NLA acting as an intermediary for dealing with text aggregators such as Factiva and LexisNexis. There's clearly a demand for this because there has been a really impressive uptake of publishers taking NLA up on the offer of negotiating on behalf of the text aggregators. It can be a confusing area for a lot of publishers, so there's a real service delivery aspect, I think, to that, which in turn helps to promote copyright. And then on the text tracker service, this was an internal piece of development that NLA's been working on, responding to growing levels of online piracy. And what it does is track down content that's been lifted illegally from publishers' websites and posted it onto illegitimate, whether it's news websites or other infringing websites. Been really popular, removed over 50,000 pieces of infringing content across 1,000 illegitimate news sites in 2021, And I know Matt is very keen to engage with as many publishers as possible to encourage them to sign up or at least find out more about the service that's available. All of these services, as I said at the beginning, are designed to complement and to align alongside CLA's and LA's corporate licensing operations. It's been a really interesting, I think, period of development for them over the last 3 years, and we fully support the work that they're doing in that regard. So that's UK collective licensing. We'll move on to international licensing now, and at 4.3 million in total, we saw a 20% reduction from 5.4 million last year. Mainly timing issues. There were a couple of significant payments from Sweden and France which were delayed and fell into the new financial year. 27 organisations in total paid revenue to us via CLA, and I think the situation overall remains broadly positive. Much of the licensing is educational licensing, much of it's statutory, so I think it is somewhat less exposed to the turbulence in the global economy. But obviously we're going to be watching this space carefully. There was some welcome news, albeit with a qualifier, which I'll come to, which is that there was a resolution to the Australian Copyright Tribunal. The ruling came out at the beginning of June last month. I think I talked about this at the last forum, so it has been a long time coming. Worth waiting for in terms of the outcome. The tribunal set the 2019 fee of the HE license at 35 million Australian dollars, which I think was generally considered by Copyright Agency and everyone else to be an excellent outcome for rights holders. However, the qualification is that we've just learnt that they are appealing the ruling, so more on this in due course. We were hoping to be able to pay some backdated revenue to you all. I think this has just come out very recently, perhaps today, yesterday, 1st of July. So, yeah, very much a qualified piece of good news, but we will obviously keep you informed on this as the situation progresses. So that's the big sector update. I just wanted to leave you with a couple of things to wrap up on. So, to reference what I touched on at the start, if you've ever tried to explain collective licensing to a colleague or perhaps, heaven forbid, a family member or a friend, perhaps that's more for us internally, goes with the gig, but you'll know that it can be challenging. Sometimes, more often than not, that you're met with blank looks, confusion, maybe a bit of indifference thrown in to the equation. It's unfortunate, as at heart we believe that collective licensing is a simple model, and should be a simple model if it's explained in the right way, and incredibly important in underpinning the copyright system that we all rely on for our businesses. So, to try and demystify this a bit, I'm not sure if this is going to work. No, it's not working. We've introduced a video on our YouTube channel, which comes in under 2 minutes. We collaborated with our authors, visual artists, colleagues in order to make sure that it was a unified message, very much a rights holder neutral video. And we're really encouraging publishers to share it. And it's something, again, we'll continue to promote. We think it's going to be really handy for you in just getting them to watch the video rather than you having to explain it. But I think it's important also for publishing houses across the board, not just in your rights teams, if you have one, finance departments who usually don't know what the money is when it's coming in, editorial teams that may get requests coming in to reuse material that is already covered by a collective license, which can erode collective licensing if permission is given out for free. So, yeah, I won't labour the point, but you know, we would really encourage you to help us out there and spread the word. Just to mention for our wonderful collective licensing team, I don't do this every time, but I thought they've been doing such a fantastic job. We've got such a great team here at PLS, really dedicated. As I think Sarah mentioned, they are mentioned at the back of your annual reviews. It is a great opportunity. We find it really rewarding to have the opportunity to speak to publishers face-to-face, the publishers that we ultimately serve. So seek them out. You'll recognise their faces, hopefully, and do have a chat with them. I'm sure it would be much appreciated. There was one introduction that I just wanted to make, a formal introduction, and that is, look at Fran here. Fran Wallace has just taken over at the beginning of the year here she is at the front there, as our publisher relations executive, taking over from Claire Zhukowska, who left us at the beginning of the year. Many of you will be have been familiar with Claire. She's rapidly getting up to speed. She will be your main contact for a lot of questions that come through. She's going to be, I think, networking and out there after drinks over after the forum. And yeah, seek her out, have a chat with her, and just put the name to the face. And then finally, just to say thank you to all of our publishers, all of the engagement that we've had over the course of the year. I mention this every time, but it's so important to us, whether it's formal consultations, whether it's those ad hoc conversations where we're testing out ideas, perhaps before they get to the consultation phase. It is really important to us, and we massively appreciate it. So thank you very much indeed. And on that, I will hand over to Amy. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Ellis. I am the head of Rights and Permissions at PLS. And 2022 marks 5 years since we launched PLSclear. And today I'm here to give an update on how things have fared over the past 5 years, and particularly this past year as well. Publishers using PLSclear will be aware that we continually update the service based on both publisher and requester feedback. And we prioritize development based on demand, so the system has changed quite a bit since it was launched in 2017. We decided to build a permissions platform back in 2014 as a response to the challenges surrounding permissions clearance across the whole of the industry. Notoriously long permissions response times potentially create a barrier to licensing and reusing content, and also open doors to potential copyright exceptions. So PLS decided to build a cost-effective and easy-to-implement solution to not only request permission, but also to make granting permission a lot easier. So a beta version of the system was launched in 2015, and we launched a free-of-charge licensing program in 2016. But the full service was officially launched in 2017 with the release of the fee-payable licensing program, which handles paid-for permissions. In 2018, we released the STM Permissions Guidelines program to relevant publishers, followed by user account enhancements that improve settings for requesters. In 2020, we relaunched the request form for requesters based on user feedback, upgraded our back office processes, and we also rolled out Zendesk to help out our help desk team quite a lot. And in 2021, we automated quite a lot of our back-end processes, further improving our team's efficiency, making their lives a lot easier. And we also upgraded the search functionality in PLSclear, which now prioritizes participating publishers' titles. This means that when requesters are searching for titles, publishers that are signed up to the service come first, and it also takes out excluded titles from the service as well. It makes it a lot easier. And then looking at 2022, we are currently rolling out quick links, so publishers can link directly to individual titles from book pages on their website. These links will bypass the need to actually search for a title, so requesters will be able to find a very specific edition of a work right from a publisher's website. We're also improving the accessibility of the PLSclear request form. We're also updating some of the reports, which I know a lot of you have been asking for, and we're working toward integrating DOIs into the platform, which we hope now to make available in the next financial year. Since the launch of the service, we've experienced growth in nearly every year. Numbers of requests dipped slightly in the 2020-2021 financial year for obvious reasons, but we bounced back last year and we've seen the growth continue into this year as well. Revenue grew in the exact same way with the slight dip during the pandemic, but despite the dip in the short term, last year we distributed more than £500,000 to publishers in permissions revenue, and we paid out our largest distribution to date in June of this year. But who's using PLSclear? The number of requesters using PLSclear has continued to grow throughout our 5 years, including an increasing number of regular users that we work really closely with. We also have seen an increasing number of overseas users making requests through the PLSclear platform. In the last financial year, we facilitated requests from 98 countries, with 75% of our users coming from outside of the UK, with users from the US, Japan, Australia, China, India, and the EU in the top 10 countries using the platform. We've also continued to onboard new publishers to the service, staying in line with our original mission to create a platform that's useful to publishers of all sizes and sectors, ensuring that all types of content are available to request and that the service levels are the same for all publishers, whether they publish 5 titles a year or 5,000 titles a year. We now have nearly 300 publishers signed up to the service that range from large multinationals to companies that publish a handful of titles a year. We have representation from a broad range of sectors, including book, journal, and magazine publishers, and an increasing number of publishers based overseas. We also recently conducted our annual publisher satisfaction survey to find out what publishers are all really thinking about the service. And the survey went out to all of our permissions contacts at participating publishers, and we were again blown away by the positive feedback and really, really useful suggestions for how we can improve the platform going forward. For a couple of highlights, 95% of the publishers who responded to our survey said that they would recommend the service to others, and 97% said that it's good value for money. If you've attended any of our previous rights and licensing forums, you know that this is my personal bugbear for permissions, but the average response time for permissions is 5 to 6 weeks. So we were really, really happy to hear that 71% of the publishers that responded said that using PLSclear has reduced response times to permissions. A further 35% said that it reduced costs associated with processing permissions. And 89% of publishers said that they are either satisfied or very satisfied with PLSclear. And all of these figures are somehow managed to be up on last year's survey, which we actually didn't think was possible. So thank you to all the publishers who responded to the survey, because we were really blown away by how positive you think of it. And again, because the service, or the feedback was so overwhelmingly positive, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to the PLSclear team. They work so, so hard to ensure that our customer service standards are consistently high for both requester and publisher users. And the feedback that we received in the survey really did reflect the brilliant work that they do day to day to keep the service running. We really could not do it without them, honestly. And I just wanted to thank them for all the hard work they do to run the help desk, manage permissions on behalf of publishers, and keep PLSclear development in line with user needs and deliver to a high standard. So a huge thank you again to my team for being awesome. Having worked on PLSclear since the beta version, I'm really happy to be here to share the service, or the success of the service over the past 5 years. And I'm happy to see publishers benefiting from a service that we really did implement for you. We wanted to make sure that we were solving the problem of permissions by reducing response times and reducing the burden of a historically admin-heavy task. So if you're interested in learning more about PLSclear, you can email me, or I'll be around at the drinks reception later on, and I'm happy to have a chat about permissions pretty much any time, because I'm a massive nerd. So. but I'm also here to discuss some of the rights management work that we've continued on this year. Over the past couple of years, PLS have been working with rights teams to provide free resources to the publishing industry to encourage best practice in rights management. And that's like across publishers' businesses, not just within rights teams. We want to help publishers manage their rights better in order to make the most of their content and to ensure publishers know what rights they hold to their content, as you can't license on your work if you don't know what you have in the first place. So, PLS launched a series of resources to provide best practice guidance for the publishing industry on rights management. In 2020, we launched the Rights and Licensing Hub, which is a resource created by members of the PLS Rights Management Group to provide best practice guidance and support to those working in the industry. If you're unfamiliar with the Hub, it was designed to serve as a resource to anyone working in publishing or looking to work in publishing. It is completely free to access and is filled with case studies, training resources, and articles written by industry rights experts and can be found at rightsandlicensing.co.uk. The resources in the Hub were developed by the PLS Rights Management Group, so thank you very much to all of you for your hard work, which the group is made up of members of rights teams from across the industry, including book, journal, and magazine publishers across all sectors. This year, we launched some new content on the Hub, including an article on metadata and standards from PLS's former chair, Mark Bide, and a table of types of rights and licensing that was compiled by members of the rights group, which includes examples and links to external resources to give you a really broad overview of what the rights industry looks like. Because it's not just about translations and permissions, it's much broader than that, and it really is an innovative and diverse part of the industry. We also launched a series of free training courses in June of 2021 as part of the Rights and Licensing Hub. And these courses were written by Claire Hodder and Ruth Tellis of RightsZone and are practical for anyone working in the publishing industry, not just rights people. So just want to make that clear. The courses are broken into 3 parts and have now been taken by 300 users or individuals across the industry, including publishing staff in rights, editorial and marketing teams, literary agents, as well as publishing students and publishing hopefuls. There are 3 courses available: an introduction to rights management, which is great for anybody working in publishing. It gives you a really good overview of why rights management is important. There's also acquiring rights to content, which is essential, particularly if you're working in an editorial team, and licensing content to others, which I recommend everyone take if you work in rights. They're all completely free, take about 45 minutes to an hour to complete, and you get a certificate that you can put on your LinkedIn page or print out, put on your fridge, whatever makes you happy. And the courses can be found at pls.thinkific.com, so do pass them along to your colleagues and your new members of staff, because they are really practical and really useful. And then finally, we've recently conducted a rights management survey of the industry. The information collected from publishers will be published in a forthcoming white paper to demonstrate the value of rights to the industry and encourage investment in effective rights management systems and staff to ensure that rights are being stored, tracked, and managed effectively by publishers. We look forward to continue working with the PLS Rights Management Group to provide resources to the industry and support all of the publishers that we work with. So thank you very much. And I'm just going to introduce my colleague, Helen Jennings, who's a product development officer at PLS, to talk about access to research.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Helen, and I am a product development officer here at PLS. And part of my responsibility is to lead and coordinate on the Access to Research service. So for those of you who might not be aware, Access to Research was launched as a 2-year trial in January 2014. It was in response to recommendations from a committee organised by the UK government known as the Finch Group. The Finch Group wanted to explore how access to publicly funded research could be expanded. One of the main recommendations of this committee was that the major academic publishers should assist with the creation of a service where public libraries could provide free access to licensed journal content. The service is therefore the result of a collaboration between publishers, represented by the Publishers Association and the Association of Learned and Professional Society Publishers, libraries, represented by Libraries Connected, and it is administrated by us, the Publishers Licensing Services. So what is Access to Research? Access to Research is an online service that provides free walk-in access to millions of academic articles in public libraries across the UK. It is beneficial to independent researchers and students studying outside of term time, but most importantly, it is freely available to the British public. Subjects covered include the sciences, art, business, engineering, history, politics, and much more. So what is our role? As I previously mentioned, PLS administers the service on behalf of publishers and libraries. This includes administering the Access to Research Help Desk for local authority and library users, managing the Summon database, so ensuring that the appropriate articles are opted in or out of the service, ensuring that there are no technical or access issues with the website, and providing monthly metrics and usage stats for local authorities and participating publishers. So all UK local authorities in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are welcome to opt their public libraries into the Access to Research service. We currently have 98% of local authorities signed up, with 3,000 libraries offering the service. The number of articles available is just shy of 39 million, and there are 21 publishers providing content. During the COVID-19 pandemic, with library buildings closed to the public as part of UK and regional lockdowns, the service was unavoidably affected. During this period, a click and collect service was introduced so that the public could still have access to content, albeit in a more limited capacity. While we are not currently at pre-lockdown usage levels, since restrictions lifted in July 2021, we have seen usage of the service steadily increase. Since January 2022, the service has recorded 73,000 searches via Summon, with the following disciplines being most selected. That's history and archaeology, languages and literature, medicine, engineering, and psychology. While the service has seen the highest usage in the following areas: London, Kirkwall, which is up in Orkney, for those who don't know, Birmingham, Bristol, and Norwich. So what do library staff think of the service? Earlier this year, we contacted staff from libraries using Access to Research to ask for their views on the service. The overall response to the survey was positive, and it was obvious that the service is clearly valued and supported by library staff as an important tool to provide quality and reliable information. I'd like to share some of the key statistics from the survey with you now. So 68% of library staff currently actively promoted the service. 75% of library staff were somewhat to extremely confident assisting users with the Access to Research service. 65% of library users ask staff about Access to Research at least once a month. And 77% of library staff said that users do not experience any issues while using the service. So looking ahead, what's next for Access to Research? We'll be focusing our efforts on recruiting the remaining local authorities yet to sign up to the service, with our objective to have 100% local authority participation. We are currently exploring avenues for targeted promotion and partnerships. We recently met with Nick Poole from the UK Library and Information Association to discuss the various ways in which we can champion the Access to Research service across the library sector as part of their lifelong learning initiative. Over the next couple of months, we will also be conducting a user survey to gain a better insight into who is using the service and for what purpose. And following the results of the local authority survey, we will also be conducting a full review of our current promotional materials to help local authorities promote the service, as well as assisting with staff training. We are also in talks with our software provider, ProQuest, to explore if more relevant usage data can be provided to us. Of course, the pressures that local authorities and public libraries are facing are widely reported, particularly in a post-pandemic world. However, it is evident that access to research helps to provide access to quality research and academic resources that libraries would struggle to provide otherwise. I think this sentiment is summed up perfectly in the following quote from a library staff member who said, "We are delighted we can offer this service. Quality information freely accessible to users enhances the value and excellence of public library services. And this is something that PLS is extremely proud to be able to facilitate." If you would like to know more about access to research, my contact details are on the screen now. I'd love to hear from you. And finally, I would just like to thank you for listening, and please do enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you very much, Tom, Amy, Helen. What I should have said at the beginning was we have allowed some time for questions. So if you have any questions, this is a very good moment. Obviously, we'll all be around for the rest of the afternoon as well. But please, if there are any questions, I'd love to hear from you. I should have given you fair warning of that. I know you've had a lot of information thrown at you, trying to convey to you what we do day in, day out on your behalf in your interests. So is there anything, or, sorry, Paul, oh, yes, there is a question. There is a microphone just coming. If you could just give us your name and your organisation, and then your question.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Anne Raymond. I represent a publisher. It's a charity called the London Topographical Society, and we produce or reproduce maps and plans of buildings, that sort of thing, for our membership. I was just wondering about the relationship you have with overseas publishers, and can we control publication of our material, say in America, who may enjoy different rights or different responsibilities? Not quite what we have in the UK.
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you very much. I might invite Madeline from CLA to follow up what I'm going to say, but in your mandate to PLS, you authorise us to enter into agreements with licensing agents, and that includes everyone who CLA is licensing through their bilateral agreements. You always have the option to opt out of that. You can do that if you're uncomfortable about any of that through your account with PLS Account Manager. But CLA does have bilateral agreements in several countries. Obviously, they're very careful about the terms of those agreements and who they enter into agreements with. And they are reciprocal agreements, so rights flow backwards and forwards, data flows backwards and forwards, and revenue flows backwards and forwards. We get differing amounts of information from those overseas organisations. So sometimes we can tell you exactly what's been done with your content. Other times we don't get such precise information. But you do have options, and it's entirely up to you. And if you want to know more, maybe Madeline, I don't know, would you like to stand up and would you like to add anything specific? There is a microphone, which Kirsty would... Okay, that is Madeline, who deals with all the overseas RROs, as we call them, CMOs. Thank you.